Good morning students. Today we are starting our first online class of class 6 and our chapter 1 is categories of computers and computer language. In this chapter students, first we will discuss about computer generation. Generation in computer terminology is a change in technology. A computer was being used. Initially, the term generation was used to distinguish between varying hardware technologies. Kids, the computer evolved as a result of man's search for a fast and accurate calculating device. The abacus was probably the original mechanical counting device invented in Asia many centuries ago. Students, many kinds of computers have been designed and built during the evolution of the modern digital computer. And now there are totally 5 generations till date. This table you can see here, this is the based on the generation of computers. First generation, the period of the first generation is 1946 to 1959 and it is based off vacuum tube. Now second generation, the period of the second generation is 1959 to 1965 and in this generation transistor were used. Third generation, the period of the third generation computer is 1965 to 1971 and in this generation we use integrated circuits. Fourth generation, the period of the fourth generation is 1971 to 1980 and VLSI microprocessor based. Here VLSI stands for very large scale integrated. And the fifth generation, the period of the fifth generation is 1982 onwards. And in this generation we use ULSI. ULSI stands for ultra large scale integration microprocessor. Here one by one we will discuss in details. First we will start from first generation of computer. This generation is based on machine language. Machine language means 0 and 1. The computer of the first generation used vacuum tubes. It understands only machine language. Machine language means 0 and 1. That is not easy to write. In this generation, mainly batch processing operating systems were used. In this image you can see here, this is the image of the first generation of the computer. All through these computers were faster than the earlier mechanical devices like abacus and that analytical engine also. First of all, they were very large in size. They consumed too much power and generated too much heat when used for even short duration of the time. They were very unreliable and broke down frequently. They required regular maintenance also. So students, we can say that the features of the first generations are first one is vacuum tube technology. It is unreliable and it supports machine language. It is difficult to write machine language and it is very costly. It's also generated a lot of heat and it has a slow input and slow output device also. And here you can see in this image it is huge in size also and it's generated lots of hits. That's why AC is also needed and it is very costly also. And some examples of this generation is ENIAC, EDVAC and UNVIAC. IBM 701 and IBM 650 is also example of first generation of computer. In first generation we use vacuum tubes. Now I will show you what is vacuum tube. Students, you can see in this image, this is the image of vacuum tube. You can see here, this is the image of vacuum tube, and a vacuum tube consists of 2 or more electrodes in a vacuum inside an airtight envelope. Most tubes have glass envelopes with a glass to metal seal based on cover sealable borosilicated glasses. Through ceramic and metal envelopes have been used in this vacuum tube. This is the image of the vacuum tube. This vacuum tube is used in first generation of computer. Now come to second generation of computer. The computer of second generation used transistor in place of vacuum tube. It used assembly language and high level language like COBOL and Fortran. Students, you can see in this image, this is the image of second generation of computer. You can see here. And the main features of second generation are first, use of transistor, reliable in comparison to the first computer, smaller in size as compared to the first generation computer, and generated less heat compared to the first generation computer. Now, but is still very costly, and AC is also needed, and it support assembly language. And some examples of this generation are IBM 1620, IBM 7094, CDC, etc. In this generation we use transistors in place of vacuum tubes. Now I will show you transistors. Students, you can see here, this is the image of transistor, and a transistor is a 3-terminal semiconductor device that regulates current or voltage flow and acts as a switch or gate for signals. Use of transistors. A transistor acts as an amplifier where the signal strength has to be increased. A transistor also acts as a switch to choose between available options. So, in second generation, they used transistor in place of vacuum tubes. Now, come to the third generation. You can see here, this is the image of the third generation of the computer. In this generation, the computer of the third generation used IC, where IC stands for integrated circuit. A single IC has many transistors, resistors and capacitor. In this image, you can also see, this is the image of the IC, means integrated circuits. This one is used in the third generation of the computer, and this is the image of the third generation of computer. This looks like, you can see, this is the image of third generation computer, and this one is IC, integrated circuit. And students, a single IC has many transistor, resistors and capacitor along with associated circuitry. The IC was invented by Zach Kibley. The development made computers smaller in size, reliable and efficient. In this generation, remote processing, time sharing, multi-programming operating systems were used. High-level language like Fortran, COBOL, Pascal, BASIC, ALGOL were used during this generation in third generation. The main features of third generation are, first one is IC used, second, more reliable in comparison to the previous two generations. Previous two generations means first generation and second generation. It is smaller in size and it's generated less less heat and faster than the first and second generation. Now students, I hope you understand this video. Now it's time for your homework. Your homework is, first, write the difference between the first generation computer and second generation computer, and the second is write any 3 characteristics of third generation of computer. Here you have to make 2 columns. First one is first generation, then second one is second generation computer. Then you have to write the difference, and in second question write any 3 characteristics of third generation. You have to write the characteristics of third generation of computer. Thank you. Have a nice day.